Hello, welcome to another episode of Maono Africa podcast. In our studio today, I'll be your host, Edith Maina, and together with my co-host.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessie, and today in our episode we have a very interesting show for you guys. We have a guest in the studio with us. We'll allow her to introduce herself, tell us where she's from, what she does, and which organization she works with and what they do. Karibu.
And hello, my name is Ruth Kakame. I work for a trade union movement that organizes workers in the domestic sector, in the education institution sector, in the hospital sector, and workers in the informal sector. An organizer, and part of my work involves a daily interaction with domestic workers right at the grassroots and conducting campaigns towards recognizing the sector.
I hope you guys have understood how she has explained, and if I may just ask, it's always in an abbreviation. Personally, I cannot even pronounce the abbreviations. Can you please now break it down by the abbreviation, please?
So it's called Kudheiha Workers Union, and Kudheiha stands for Kenya Union of Domestic, Hotels, Education Institutions, Hospital and Allied Workers. So under the Allied Workers is where we've recently started organizing workers in the informal sector. So that makes Kudheiha.
Yes. Now I can pronounce it.
Kudheiha.
Kudheiha.
Yes.
Welcome to our conversation today. To start with, can you tell us more about Kudheiha?
So Kudheiha is it's an old trade union movement. It started way back in 1945 and got registered in 1951. And our mandate has been to bring together, to mobilize workers in the lowest cadre of employment. By this we mean that any worker that goes to work and they work as in the schools, right from primary schools, secondary schools, colleges and universities. If you're a worker and you're working in the lowest rank, then you're eligible to become a member of Kudheiha. Same applies to also workers in the hospital sector, also in the hotel sector, but in the hotel sector, except the management, then all workers are eligible to be members of Kudheiha, and now the domestic sector. So the domestic sector is where I work in. I have a background of having worked as a domestic worker. Okay. And I got a privilege of being the chairperson of the National Domestic Workers Council. So I work mostly in the domestic sector as a leader of the sector. So in the domestic sector, you will know a domestic sector because of the women who wash in homes, those who look after children, those who do we call it gardening work. We have private security officers, private drivers, and general worker in a household. Those become members of our union. And also we have this group of domestic workers who move from Kenya to go and work in the Middle East. They also fall under our membership as migrant domestic workers. We have those who move to the Middle East, and locally we also have foreigners who come to work in Kenya as domestic workers, like Tanzanians, Ugandans, Burundians, yeah. For those, and Rwandese also I've come across them. So if they work in Kenya as domestic workers, they are migrant domestic workers, they are also eligible to join Kudheiha.
That's nice, and it's good to know. Now you've talked about the migration of workers and all that, and we saw that in your website there's a safe migration of labor. Can you please at least explain to our viewers what is safe labor migration?
Yes, we besides labor migration, part of what we do, I'll come to that, yeah, is to organize workers. Like in the domestic sector, you realize that domestic workers do not know that they're also supposed to join the trade union. because they are workers. The perception is that they are casual laborers, they just come in to assist a family, but they're employed on a regular basis and they are being paid a salary. It can be on a daily rate, it can be on a monthly rate, it can be on a weekly rate, it can be a one-off for mama fuas, those who wait at the gates, get quick employment, and so they do not know that they are also workers. They, sometimes their attitude towards the domestic sector, feeling that our work is of lesser value, our work is not dignified. So you find that most of them, just going by that attitude, do not feel that there's also a trade union movement that organizes them. So part of our work for the domestic sector is to bring them to come together collectively so that they have one voice. And once they become members of the union, then our responsibility is to ensure that their terms and conditions of employment are being considered by employers, whereby they are paid decent wages. You hear that most of them are engaged and the amount of salaries they're getting is way too low, and they're doing a lot of work in those homes. So their wages are decent. Also the terms, in terms of, are they given time to rest? For those who live in those households, are their works regulated? They're not being overworked. And also if they become pregnant, they're allowed to go on maternity leave, come and get the same employment without finding replacement. And also if they get injured at work, they also, due process is followed until, they are taken to a better hospital, because maybe the injury has come from the workplace. And if they are incapacitated and they are not able to work, are they compensated for that? Yeah. So and also issues around also contracts. Are they just being given any other work that comes in the household, or there's a checklist of, a description of the work they're supposed to do? So all those terms of employment is also what we do. We also represent them in mediation when their contracts have come to an end. And where we need to ask for their terminal benefits, then we do ask for that. So we do legal representation and the intervention for them when they have problems at work for free once they become our members. Then there's also the national advocacy, which we do. We push with the government on areas of improvement within the sector, like recognizing them also to be part of the NSSF, to be to be members of the NSSF, to also have them not discriminated at work, to also have international conventions ratified by our government so that they can accorded, recognition and decent work as workers, and also look at the gaps within our legal framework and be able to submit our recommendations on what are areas that will really add value to that life of a domestic worker. So, and also now coming into the question of migration, also what is the state of Kenyan domestic workers moving to other countries? Are they protected? Or we will just see the stories that we see on social media. A girl gets to Saudi Arabia, they are stranded, calling back the agents, they are blocked or no one responds. So our responsibility is also to ensure that there's a checklist of what the girls need to know before they leave the country. We have a toll-free line which I will share, so that for that girl who does not know where to get the information, they can call us for advisory. So also getting to know, are they going through a licensed agent, or it's a broker? Or it is an agent that is not registered and they are doing, businesses that are not licensed. So just to also let them know which are the registered agents, and also know what is their roles and responsibility when they get to destination countries, and where to report when they are in distress and they need to be assisted, and also know what is available for them when they get to destination countries. So we work within a network of other civil society organizations where if someone is in problems, you can refer them for assistance.
That's really great.
Yeah, and create awareness to the public on safe labor migration right from the time you're recruited, while on transit in the plane, and upon arrival when you get to those countries. Yeah.
So now that you have mentioned about the eligibility to join the trade union.
Yeah.
Can you explain more? Is just being a worker the only qualification, there is more qualification that one is needed, and what is the process of joining the trade union?
Now, the way trade union movements were formed, they were formed for the working population. That does not mean that any person who is not a worker, they cannot be represented. But now for, being a member of the union, it secures your employment, because once you're terminated, you can go to the union for free legal intervention. Of course, being a member of the union, you have to pay monthly subscription. The same way teachers, doctors, lecturers have their union and their dues are remitted from their salaries. So even with other members, other public, we always advise them to join a union that represents their sector. There are over 45 trade unions in Kenya. If you're working in the shoe sector, there's a union for you. If you're working in the garment sector, there's a union for you. If you're a medic, we hear of medics, we hear of teachers, we hear of people working in the plantation. But if you're working in the printing sector, in the chemical, all workers have a trade union that represents them. So, and being a member of the union, you are in the labor, in the workforce. So, because it has to establish a relationship between a worker and an employer, so you have to be in employment. Okay. But another responsibility of the union is also to look at the unemployed, and what are preparing them also for employment. We look at also, like for instance, in the informal sector in Kudheiha, you find that these are people who are self-employed. But being self-employed, there are also other issues besides your employment that may make your employment vulnerable, like the issues of kanjos, coming in and having to take some amount of money from you, like you have to pay a daily tax sort of, and sometimes also conditions of that market area you're working. As we talk of occupational safety and health, has the county or whoever is responsible made sure that there's a toilet, just some decent working environment for you? For the women, do they have somewhere they can dispose of their sanitary towels? Is the place clean? You see, so we also negotiate at the county level as part of our work, also doing negotiation on behalf of employers. So we also negotiate on behalf of the workers on better policies that can cushion protection of workers, whether you're a worker or employers. And that is for workers in the informal sector. In the formal sector now, those who are now employed, and there's a worker here and there's an employer here. Remember, trade unions work in tripartite. That is, there has to be an employer, there has to be a government, and there has to be a worker for them to work together. So you might be a worker today and tomorrow you're an employer. So how do we again create a synergy amongst the three of us that will enable a safety, sort of a positive existence for this worker later on. So you can be a worker today and tomorrow you're an employer. So part of the networking within the trade union is also to bring an employer on board. But generally it represents the interest of its workers who are part of its membership.
Okay, just to add on that, can you give a range to our viewers on average, what is the monthly subscription?
So now in Kudheiha, it is 2% of your gross salary. Remember, we have a teacher who's being paid 400,000 Kenya shillings. And there's a domestic worker who's paid below the minimum wage, something like 7,000. So we also look at, like for the domestic sector, they are the least subscribers in the union, because we consider also their wages, which are a bit not constant, so they pay 150 Kenya shillings every month. But for other workers in the formal setup of employment, they are deducted 2% of their gross salary. It can be different from a nurse who's employed at Aga Khan, yeah? Okay. And a support staff teacher in a local, you know, primary school that maybe their wage is way too low. So we also look at that in terms of subscription, but baseline as per our policy, it's 2% of the gross. But for the domestic sector, it's only 150 every month.
Okay, thank you.
Now, let me ask, as the Kudheiha, you find that mostly in the domestic sector, you find that there's a large number of children working. Now, for you people, what's the legal age that someone can work in the formal and informal sector? And if these children, because you find mostly in the domestic homes, maybe mostly they employ the kids. Do you also like check these kids into consideration and maybe negotiate for their rights and their payments?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's also okay. So in our membership, at the moment we've not yet started recruiting child domestic workers. So at this stage, remember, just as the domestic sector is invisible in our context, yeah, because even if you look at our membership, we, out of the, you know, the potential out there, we have over, you know, 3 million domestic workers in Kenya. We've only managed to recruit around 13,000 domestic workers in Kenya as a country. So you can just think about where are the rest and what is happening to them in those households, yeah. So just going by that, you also realize that the same way they are invisible in those households, no one knows what goes in there. So you can imagine a child, and we know child labor in Kenya is illegal. And even in our daily interaction with domestic workers, for them to even disclose that they started working as children, it's a secret to them, because they know I might be arrested by a local chief because I don't want to go to school. Yeah, so it is also a challenge for us to identify who is a child in the domestic sector. So recently, through the Freedom Fund, we've started now to create awareness about the existence of children working within the sector, and they're still in hiding. So right now, I cannot say that we've been able to recruit, but we've created awareness. We've done some survey with local administrators, and there's also been, you know, the issue of knowing, there's been a sort of understanding how far and how extreme can we say that a child is being, you know, taken advantage of, and instead of now child work, they are being exposed to child domestic work. Because some of the responses that we've been getting in our survey is that drawing the line between child work and child domestic work is where the gap is. You find that children are being involved in domestic work, but families think that this is just part of their coexistence in the society. For instance, in Kibra, we came across this community leader who told us that it is normal for children to knock doors and ask for work. Like, I want to go fetch water for you, and in return you'll give me 20 shillings. The community around thinks that this is a tradition and it's normal, but in essence, you know, this child is going to fetch water. That is part of domestic co. You're paying them, and you know, in employment we say that it is labor in return of wages. So you're paying them that 20 shillings, and it becomes a routine. So this child eventually will always know that I go ask that neighbor to give me work, they pay me back, and it is normal in this community. Yeah? So you find that they're being involved into, you know, child domestic work, but the community doesn't accept that that is work, simply because part of that money is going to boost the child's income in their own household. And that note also, we also came across a scenario of also young girls having to, especially within our membership, not for the live-in domestic workers, the daily and get the ones who come in, they live out here, come in the morning, leave in the evening, or they are on standby calls. Come on Saturday and work for me. So you find that even for this one, sometimes this mother, because of the push factors, poverty, sometimes you have to go an extra mile to get extra income to fend your family. So you find that this mother wants to tag along their daughter to come and help them clear, wash in this compound, finish, then we go to another household, so that by the end of the day, we've been able to serve 3 households. So, and all this money is not paid to the child, it is paid to the mother. So it's this child is being tagged along, but you do not realize that it is not, they are not helpers, they are actually working. So, exploiting children in the name of they have to help their parents, because we believe this other time the child could be engaging in other activities that contributes to their development, and they're allowed to enjoy freedoms as children. So these things are happening, but there are still a lot of misunderstanding on to what extremes do we engage children, and what drawing the line between child work and child domestic work and child labor in the same context. So it is there, it is happening, but it is still undercover. Yeah.
Okay, so now that we are talking about child work, that is one of the programs that we are coming up with. So it is a future program. Do you have any other programs that are covering or looking into child's work, child domestic work?
We later on, because this has been part of, we've just started. Remember our focus previously was on purely domestic workers and of course adults. So we just started our engagement with child domestic workers. And we are intending also to create a lot of awareness in the communities, especially communities in Nairobi, communities that are, they are living in the informal settlements, because that's where you find that there's a high prevalence of exploiting children by engaging them into labor. So we will be engaging different community gatekeepers, local administration, and also where we also need, the police to come in. They come into our session, so that basically we have education on, educating them on who is a child. Because there are communities that think the moment you've started growing breasts as a lady, you've had a child at those tender ages, you are already an adult. And if you look at a teenage mother, sometimes the community will let you be independent and forget that you're also still a child, and there are some things that you're not mature enough to handle as a child. Yeah. So, and those are circumstances that even make this young mother start involving themselves into child domestic work, and they're exploited because they do not understand their responsibilities as young workers. So we are intending to educate the communities on first who is a child, and what is child work, what is child domestic work, and basic child rights that they need to know. And we cannot say that engaging a child in labor is something that can end. There are also children, like the case of a teenage mother, or a family that is held by a child, or also other circumstances within a household that may force a child to go work. Then what is the best time to allow a child to go work? You see? And is it denying them also their right to education? Is it also, the work that you're engaging these children, Is it work that is harmless? Something that, you know, we do not want to see a child being given heavy, you know, machines to lift, machines that are dangerous to them. Is their health compromised as a child? Is their development, are they denied other child rights as children? So we want the community to know all these things. Am I giving them chemicals that are too, you know, harsh for them? Are they supervised also as they work? Are they working within the hours that they're supposed to work? Are we allowing them to go to school? Then later on we say, okay, now you can work here. This is the amount of work. I will supervise you, then I will reward you. Are they rewarded shelter, or is it money, or is it a gift in exchange? Is it something decent in nature, or they are being exploited because they are minors? Okay. So we want to create awareness in all these areas so that the community can know what is the extreme of engaging the child and what is exploiting a child in this case. And how can we protect, again, children from getting exploited, abused, or mistreated as they get involved into this labor. And where they see that a child is going through all this, where again can they report? Yeah.
Now, to clarify on that, I would like you to tell our viewers, according to your trade union, there is a Labor Act and Children's Act, which they give. Each of the acts give a different age at which a child can start working. According to your trade union, which is the legal age for a child to start working?
Well, we have when engaging a child, there are so many, you know, we borrow our laws from very many, how will I call it, very many international frameworks, laws, conventions, protocols. So you find that it narrows down to what we have locally. And what supersedes in our context, like our constitution, our labor laws, and all things that come out of it, like, you know, the Child Act, the rights, you know, the fundamental rights of a person, a human being in this context. So the child rights, I'm not a lawyer in this case, so you find that under the labor laws of engagement, so labor laws of engagement allow a child to, you know, we define a child as a minor, going by our constitution, which says a child should be involved at the age of 18 years of age. But again, you look at the child rights, it speaks of 16.
The labor laws.
So labor laws looks. The labor laws, it's 16.
Children's
18, and our constitution speaks of a minor being 18 years of age. So we are looking at it in the context of you know, when a child completes high school, sometimes you find that there are those children who complete high school before they meet the 18-year age bracket. So what happens during these years? You might have a privilege of, you know, going to school earlier, and you know, by age 16 you're done with high school. So between those two ages, labor looks at it in that what will you be doing? You might be coming from maybe a family that runs their personal business, and they take you into being part of the, you know, but then you grow entrepreneurial wise. Then there are those who will say that I have to go hustle for myself. I might go look for some maybe cheap labor or some engagements so that I also earn an income after high school. You know, the excitement of coming out of high school, So it gives that opportunity for that young person to get involved around those two ages. So sometimes, you know, it contradicts that age bracket of a minor, but labor-wise, we look at it in the context of what will be happening between these two periods. So the child right comes in whereby you're involved in these 2 years after high school. What happens between that? Are you entitled to Employment Act privileges as a worker? Yes, because you're getting involved into employment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, so it takes care of, those adults that will be engaged in labor in between, so that they do not encounter exploitation. We, from our end, we also push for, harmonization of these laws, because at some point it is a bit, conflicting on are they still, because there are also debates and arguments on, they are still children, yeah? So sometimes even in this child work advocacy, we also consider the fact that we will still have children that will be engaged in these years, but as per our constitution, they are regarded as minors. But if you look at the engagement in labor, they are considered as workers in the working force. Yeah.
Now, here is a case where a domestic worker probably has had some conflict with the employer where they're not being paid, they are being harassed, and maybe to an extent of being fired. So how does Kudheiha come in? Can you give us the steps from where you come in to make sure that either this worker is reinstated, compensated, and there's a good coexistence now between her, him, and the employer?
Okay. Now, in our dispute resolution, and part of what we do is to intervene in cases where a worker feels that they've been terminated, whether fairly or unfairly. Yeah? There are those cases whereby they are dismissed without even having time to explain. Like, for instance, they came in, they reported in January, the second week instead of coming in the first week, yeah, after Christmas holidays. So they've been told not to enter my house, go back where you came from. There's an instance whereby an employer will just call you on phone to tell you, don't come to my house tomorrow. There are those that will be told by end of next week, I'm traveling and I want you to go away. So there are different ways in which domestic workers get dismissed from work. So part of what we do, for members, who remember I said the trade union represents its members, yeah? So for members, that doesn't mean we don't represent non-members. So what we do, we are allowed by law to reach out to the employer. So we call employers directly. So to establish if the complaint is genuine. Of course, the employers who say, I do not recognize that mama, I even don't know her. It's funny how they get employed, yeah? There's no contract, there's nothing, so you cannot take me anywhere. Yeah, it is on verbal agreement. So there are those who will say that I do not know her. There are those whom we will call and they respond positively. So we call, then we do a letter to them, deliver it through our messengers, deliver it to the households. Then we, of course, booking for a session to have a talk with them. There are those who will show up, there are those who will not show up. We always encourage that they come to us so that we find an amicable. We hear from their end also. Yeah. Sometimes it could be the worker who's the problem. Yeah. Sometimes the problem could have originated from the employer. So we book for a session to have a meeting with them. They come to the office. We talk it out. Then we also, as we talk it out, also we put down the demands from the worker just by hearing both sides. So at that level, we mediate, being guided by the labor laws, yeah? So of course, from there is when we now pick the claims. So there are good employers whom we resolve at that level. They do not want it to escalate. But of course, there are those who will want to drag the process, bring in lawyers on board. Without lawyers, again, they'll miss out. They will not attend the session, so it becomes also another push from our end. So we do some other letter again, just to remind them of how far we've come from in terms of mediation. We are always allowed to do at least 3 to make 3 communications. So for those, there are those who are good. We may not even get to the second, and we finish it up. They pay, and that's it. Of course, there are those who will settle it at the second communication. At the third, when there are those who will settle it at the third, there are those who totally refuse to show up or to settle the matter. We are allowed to report to the minister for arbitration. So the minister will appoint, we call them conciliators, who will conciliate. So they will, now that is beyond us as a trade union, now the ministry is involved, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. So it is them in that level who invite the employer. The employers who will solve it at that level, and there are those who will not show up at all. It's not easy. Or they may even relocate from their houses and go to other places. So at that level, when the ministry fails to solve it or to settle it, they are the ones who give us a certificate to proceed to court. So once it has not been solved at the ministry level, the ministry gives us now the go-ahead to report it in court. So when it is reported in the industrial court, then it is now asked to follow up with our lawyers until we get court rulings. So that is our procedures. For non-members, it is we do not discriminate. As long as you're a domestic worker in Kenya, you might have known us maybe through someone else. It is never too late. We encourage you to also lodge your complaints with us, so that we also represent you through the same stages.
Now, as we are now coming to the end of our show, what are some of the challenges that you as Kudheiha has faced during your fight and for the rights of domestic workers?
I think sometimes cooperation from employers. It is still a struggle to have domestic workers recognized in this country. So we've been really pushing for this international convention to be ratified by Kenya that specifically looks into issues of domestic workers. It's Convention 189 that Kenya also adopted it in 2013. So up to date, it has not been ratified by our government. So it is still a push to tell the government that we have these working women that are really working so hard, but no one recognizes them as workers. So our struggle has been to push for that until it's ratified. It has been a journey and a process. And the other struggle is, as I said, cooperation also from employers, especially when we are solving disputes, grievances. Sometimes, offsetting the dues and paying the worker what they're entitled to. When you're not paying an SSF for this worker, that is not something that we should drag. It is very straightforward. So, just pushing them, it becomes a lot of, back and forth, consultations, communications. So it has been, something that we, of course, when the government recognizes us and, then that's when we may have some of these things being taken into consideration. And also the greatest challenge has also been organizing these workers where they are. We might not have access to some homes because of security, permits to enter into these households. And also, mobility of the women. Today they decide to get into business, tomorrow they are working as domestic workers, wakose kazi, tomorrow they decide to travel back to the rural, after some years they come back again. So also the sector itself, yeah, so organizing them, having to organize them again and again and again, getting in and falling out of the sector has been our challenge to bring them together. Yeah.
As now we wind up, you mentioned that you guys have a toll-free number. You can give it to us, to our viewers, then at least tell us where your offices are located, and if you have a website they can visit.
Yes, we have a toll-free line that is free of charge for any worker, not only domestic worker. If you're a worker and you need us to advise you, to refer you and help you, then call us on 0800-722-832. And we have offices in all counties. So, but if you're situated in any part of the country, just call us so that we link you to the nearest office. In Nairobi, we are situated at Sonalax House along Moi Avenue at both 4th and 6th floors. We also have a Facebook page. Just go straight to Kenya Union of Domestic Workers, Kudheiha in abbreviation, Kudheiha. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, yes, for the youth. Then you can find us also on Twitter, still on Kudheiha. You can find us on TikTok, still with the same name. And also our website, just Google Kudheiha, then you will have all the information. Thank you.
So on our last question, what has been your highlights working with the union, and what is your parting shot to our viewers?
It's quite interesting to work with the union, especially where you have to work for the marginalized, for the vulnerable, for people who feel that the society does not value the work that they are doing, when indeed it's contributing to our economies. You can imagine a day where all domestic workers will say that they do not want to work, then what will happen to the employers? So domestic workers should be accorded the rights that they deserve as human beings and as workers. So I call on everyone out there that as you go about your daily business, think about that domestic worker. It can be your mother, it can be your sister, it can be your relative, it can be your neighbor. Treat them as human beings. So I want to appreciate Maono Africa for bringing us Kudheiha into this platform. It is not Ruth who is speaking, but it's the voice of domestic workers. So let's respect domestic workers and also child domestic workers. Thank you.